Okay, so for this week's episode 4, we have a two-part video. This is the first part today, and we wanted to talk about lead source and attribution. And we know this is a big topic for marketers right now because you may have, had your budget cut or have had dollars where you need to reinvest from offline channels to online. And so, what are the best channels to do that are performing for you? And if you don't have your reporting nailed down to give you that data, it's going to be really hard to make those decisions. So before we even go into the different ways that you can track lead source and attribution, which we'll do on the second part, and we'll talk about the pros and cons to each, we wanted to talk through first, what are the things you need to think about before you even set up this type of reporting? Because there are different ways to do it. So in order to figure out which one will serve you best, there's a few things you need to keep in
mind. Yeah, it's one of those things that doesn't really have a clear, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So the more information, data, thoughts that you can put in at the front end, the better your decision is going to be when you actually have to decide on the method that you want to go down.
And this is a big frustration, I think, when working with clients, because they're like, what's the best way to do it? And it's like, well,
it depends.
It depends, which is never the answer you want to hear.
I feel like it depends is like always.
Yeah, but especially for this, because there are so many ways to do it. There's different levels of complexity. And so, yeah, so what's the first thing you need to keep in mind?
So I think one of the first things is really how much budget and how much marketing are you doing? Because obviously one of the biggest reasons why you want to know what's performing well is so you can tweak the dials of your marketing, put budget in different places, make sure that your budget is optimized through different channels and programs. And if maybe you have had budget decreases now, or maybe you're a startup ramping up and you don't have your huge marketing budget, then you don't need to put tons of money, resources, and effort into whatever attribution or lead source method or potentially tool that you might invest in. You don't want to spend more on the reporting than you are on your marketing. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a weird balance there. So really think about, okay, this is how much marketing I'm doing, this is how much budget I'm putting in. I need to have a solution that makes sense within that context, and not, you can get a little bit carried away sometimes and go too far and maybe get invest in a tool too early. You don't want to do that. You need to make sure that you have the right solution for you at that time.
Yeah.
And solutions can grow and improve over time, and maybe you will invest in a tool, but don't get too ahead of yourself.
Totally. That's a big point to think about, because it does take money and investment. Even when you think about manpower, that's an investment as well. And
which a lot of people forget about.
A lot of people forget. And so if you don't have a huge marketing budget, which is what reporting should help you do, it needs to figure out where you should invest your dollars. So if you don't have a lot of dollars in general, you probably don't want to be over investing in this, right? At least for that time being.
Yeah. And you can, maybe if you put all that budget into the reporting, you could just put it into your marketing. And the reason why it's important is because there are lots of different options, some that are pretty easy that you can do and get good enough reporting. It's not like if you want to get into attribution or lead source, you have to. There's like an entry level which is still pretty vast and has a lot of time and manpower and budget required. There are very easy options that you can just get off the ground pretty quickly that might be able to suit your needs for the time being.
Yeah.
So another one is the actual, your team size, and then on top of that, any budget that you do have for this project. So if you have your marketing ops team of one, and you don't really have much support, maybe you don't have a consulting agency helping you as well, because you don't have budget for that. Maybe it's not time to invest in a tool like Visible, or maybe it's not time to build out this, get a BI tool and build out all of this complex reporting and all of the processes that you need on the front end to be able to handle that. Because it can be a full-time job, just this part of it. There's so much that goes into it, from the UTM tracking, the processes, the training the team to use things properly, how you set up your programs and campaigns, implementing a tool if you are going to be adding to your stack. So you really need to think about what can you realistically take on from a time point of view that isn't going to just completely take over your role. And then maybe you do have an agency that can support you, so maybe you can get some more hours with them to work on this project. So that is a very important point that I think a lot of people outside of marketing operations forget about, where maybe your boss goes, we've got to get visible, we've got to get this reporting, and they don't know how much goes into it. So you're the marketing ops person of one or two, or maybe, and you need to make sure that you really understand what's going to go into each option and how much time you actually have to put into this, and then communicate that with whoever's asking you to get these reports, or communicate that to yourself and really believe that yourself to figure out what you need to do.
Yeah, I've seen many times clients or heard stories from peers where the company bought the tool too early, and then it kind of sat there, and then when it came to renewal, they they decide not to, but then a year later from them, when they're a bit more sophisticated, they're like, oh, we need to invest in a tool. And then they almost feel weird going back to that other tool, which could have been the better tool for them, but they just can't stomach going through that again. So then they choose maybe something that doesn't suit their needs. So really pinpointing, and being judicious on when's the best time to bring in that tool to make it successful is key.
And then related to a tool, so both of those options are kind of, maybe directed towards the smaller teams, smaller budgets and everything. But maybe you are a more established team. Maybe you are, maybe you already have a tool. Maybe you have maybe you've got Domo or Tableau, or maybe, you've already got a lot of reporting built out in Salesforce or even Einstein or something, but you're looking to redo it. Maybe it's not giving you what you need, and you're trying to solve different problems and report on different things. And so if you have something within your stack, or if you already have some reports, then you really need to figure out what are the requirements for that tool, right? What's set up already, what do you need to make sure you're doing if you're building out processes within Marketo and with your team to be able to track things properly. Is that just going to feed up straight into whatever third-party tool you have perfectly and your reports are going to work? Or are you going to have to do a load of work within the tool you already have? Or do you have to replace that tool potentially? Figuring out what you have within your stack from a reporting side, assuming you already have, your marketing automation, your CRM and everything. Figuring out from the reporting side what tool you have, the requirements of that tool, the different aspects that you need to, really think about from how that tool works, the data that you're going to be digesting in there, and then that will obviously build into the processes and the way that you're going to report on things, and the way that you're going to build out that reporting infrastructure on more on the front end. So just trying to figure out kind of what you have, and build that into your plan too.
What you have is important too from a data standpoint, because if data is just an issue in general, a lot of these reporting tools are only good as the data that you put into it. So that's going to be part of what you're looking at of what I have. It's first the data, the people, the existing tools, and what's going to be, replacing that. What am I missing? But understanding all of the data that you have is going to be really important, so that you don't, find out that too late and then be, set back to actually set up the infrastructure for it.
Right, and then sometimes you might have, I've seen it before, where you've got Tableau and there was someone that was running that, and then that person leaves, so it's kind of sitting there and it's doing what it needs to do, kind of based on everything that was set up when that person was there. But now you want to change things, you have to be like, well, we don't have the resources to change anything in Tableau, so now we've got to make the decision. Do we dump everything that we've done there? Do we need to hire there? There's a lot of questions you need to figure out before you even figure out what way you want to report on attributions, these sorts. And then the final one is just, what are you going to do with the reports? It's kind of related to the first one, but a lot of times companies just aren't even ready to really use the data that they get out of this. It's the data is not really operationalized through the decision-making processes within marketing. They're not used to seeing the type of data that you might be able to provide, and it's just you're just not mature enough. You're not at that level in your maturity to be able to really make the best use of the data. So maybe you don't need to invest a lot of money. Maybe you don't need to spend a lot of time. Maybe people are asking for some data, and the way they're asking, you in your head, you're thinking, oh my God, I've got to spend 3 months building this out. But really, could you just solve what they're looking for, get some directional information that's going to improve their decision making, help them a little bit now, which could satisfy them for now without that 3-month project? I'm not saying you're going to be able to do that every time. Maybe they are ready, but actually critically thinking about whether they're actually going to use the data, because everyone wants data. Right? Everyone's being told you should have data, you've got to make data-driven decisions. But then sometimes when people get the data, that they feel like that's the job that's done, right? But no, you need to start using that data. So sometimes it's better to give them a little bit of data, see if they use it, and then if they start coming back to you with specific problems with that data, then you can then you've got your project plan.
Well, you understand what they're looking for too.
And you build it out in an iterative you build it out in an iterative way where you kind of improve it based on their feedback as opposed to going all the way to the end and then they still don't use it.
Yeah, you're like slowly maturing over time, baby steps. I think a big thing to this too, and one thing you can take away from this even before you go down the path of, doing, selecting a tool or doing more advanced lead source and attribution reporting is the education piece. Because I think a lot of the times in marketing and operations, we think with like a tool or some type of reporting is like work hard in a silo, make sure it's perfect, and then roll it out. But then the rest of the marketing team knows nothing about what you're doing. They're not bought into the concepts. People outside of marketing don't know. And so I think similar to like, you're kind of running your own campaign for your reporting. You're trying to get buy-in from people, really educating them, nurturing them along. And that can be even before you make a decision. You maybe have a meeting where you present on why this type of reporting is important, what they can get out of it. Maybe even speak to each team to say like, hey, field marketing, it's really hard just to look at one set of like, lead creation or anything like net new MQLs to see how your events are doing, because you support more mid-funnel. What would be better is if we're looking at attribution and then describe to them what attribution is. Just know your audiences have all different levels of education on this type of reporting, and once they really understand it, and this can be small bits over time, maybe like each Friday you decide to roll out these concepts in your marketing team. Maybe even talk to sales about it, like your sales leaders. You might have like a group of just head leaders that you talk through, like this is the type of reporting we're going to get, this is how you're going to use it. Maybe we're not going to replace a level of your reporting, especially on the sales side. We're just supplementing it so you can see how marketing is doing. And then even plan for how you're going to incorporate that into like your board reporting. This is all upfront work that's going to make the adoption of your reporting easier and better and long lasting. And they're actually going to use the reports. And then that education should still remain as you start to roll them out.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few things to think about, and I think we're going to be recording the video soon on the different options you have. There are a lot. I think we're going to go through about 6 different options. There are still plenty more. But yeah, so we'll be releasing that in the next week or 2, but hopefully this is helpful for those that are looking to try and figure out what's working and not working during this crazy time, or before this crazy time as well. Yeah, tune into Forward.
Thanks. Yeah.
Bye.